Matt, don't do this.
Mr. Ayala, yes or no? Are you the vigilante known as the White Tiger?
Objection! Objection, Your Honor.
Yes or no? Mr. Ayala.
So he's an idiot.
Yeah.
A few moments later.
This is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
Filling a hole like this, it's not rocket science.
What inspired Matt Murdock to reveal his own client identity, putting his life and his family's life in danger?
I'm a really good lawyer.
Shut it! What would force a lawyer to be so reckless to destroy his client's confidentiality?
He was an idiot.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
Well, that clip tastes like fine wine, hasn't it? You know what's worse than seeing something you love go up in flames? Seeing it get praised as a 9.1 out of 10 on IMDb.
It's an interesting take, I like it. But yeah, no, sorry buddy. Way off on that one.
Thankfully, we've matured a little bit since then, and it's gone down to an 8.3, but I still get the vibe I'm going against the grain here. A lot of people like this show. A lot of people have been defending this show. I'm aware this take isn't going to be very good for making friends in my comment section. I know you're there, don't worry, I hear you. I'm going to be making sure to be backing up my receipts on this. So, here's the thing. Netflix's Daredevil was an amazing display of storytelling. It did an amazing job at balancing both story and spectacle. So if you like flashy fight scenes, you were entertained. If you liked complex character-focused narratives, you were also entertained. And if you happen to like both, you're in for a hell of a treat, let me tell you. Due to the creation of Disney+, Daredevil was ended on its third season. It was a very sad day and a very frustrating day. It's hard. It's really hard when a show is cancelled in its prime due to no fault of its own, especially when the creators are more than willing to create 4th and 5th seasons. But it can be argued, as sad as it was, in the end it was a very satisfying conclusion to many of the plot threads built over 3 seasons, a final note and a beautiful song, and it's always better to leave the people wanting more. Nothing can take away that Daredevil was an incredible achievement. It managed to introduce a whole generation of people to the character of Daredevil, creating an unforgettable show on an incredibly tight budget, a show which became the definitive view audiences have of these characters. They are iconic in their roles, so much so that they even return to play new iterations of these characters in the MCU. A lot of people were upset to hear that Born Again originally wouldn't be a continuation of the Netflix show, and that had a strong influence on the creative overhaul, which ended up connecting this new show back to the old. And fans rejoiced for the second coming of Daredevil, which was foretold in the sacred text, and the angels did cheer. We were back to grounded and character-focused storytelling once again. Gone were the days where we had unfunny comedy and bombastic action set pieces. We'd returned back to the characters that we loved. Matt Murdock returned back to the screen. Fisk returned back into the screen. Foggy, a bad example. The show aired and fans were happy again, enthralled in this new tale of Fisk and Matt facing it off once again in this classic duel. Born Again more than achieved its goals in making a lot of fans happy, but it's very unfortunate to say, I do not share that joy. Because Born Again isn't the triumphant return back to deep character writing and amazing fight scenes. It's the same old generic Marvel slop we've seen 1,000 times. The qualities that made the original Netflix show great are now gone. It's vapid and pretentious at best, and at worst it actively dismantles everything that made Netflix's Daredevil great. Even if you only look at the show through its own merits, I think it's very easy to see that it's not even just a bad sequel. It's just a bad show. The plot has more holes than Swiss cheese. The pacing is all over the place. We jump between November to New Year's Eve to March, yet the story treats these events like they're happening within the same week. Nothing makes any kind of sense, and it certainly doesn't line up with the original series. The editing and cinematography are atrocious. I've seen better edited student fan films with weird lighting choices, hyperactive cuts during fight scenes, weightless fight scenes, covered in CGI smoke and digidoubles. And speaking of visual effects, it throws all the cheap tricks at the lens that you can think of to hide how bad it actually looks. 2D stock smoke elements on a 3D shot, stock lens glare, horrible 2.5D compositing, and this horrible digital camera shake that drives me up the wall because they've used this basic node in Nuke that has this really artificial shake that reminds me of second year student showreel, using all these cheap tricks to hide how bad it actually looks, ironically making it look cheaper. So many scenes overuse music, especially its theme music, far too much in moments that should absolutely be silent, making the music become very repetitive. Every slow character moment, every fight scene, every time Matt Murdock stops to eat his breakfast, it's there. They never just let the story speak for itself. And so much of this story is vapid filler. If you only watch episode 1, 8 and 9, I promise you it's going to make far more sense to you than it does to me. These problems absolutely deserve to be discussed in greater detail, but no matter how much I talk about them, I don't think it would really get to the core of the issue, and I'm kind of on the clock here. Netflix's Daredevil had amazing writing. It was a narrative in which the character motivations drove the plot forwards, fueling it full of juicy character drama which created this amazing tapestry of themes, message and character work, forming a beautifully evocative story. It's one of my favourite TV shows right next to Better Call Saul, because every minute detail rewards you for engaging with the story. Not a single narrative beat went to waste, and it invites you to invest in these characters for its amazing payoffs. Some people say they didn't care for these character scenes.
And honestly, it was also much better so far than season 3 of the original. You can skip that one.
But I'm not actually sure most audiences would agree. Spectacle needs substance to resonate long after the initial viewing. It's the difference between a cheap thrill and a memorable experience, like comparing a Michael Bay film to a Wes Anderson movie. When you have no substance, you're treating characters like they're nothing more than a theme park ride. They don't have motives, they're simply dragged from one scene to the next, and this leaves you with pale facades, not characters. Audiences then just get bored and leave, when characters are nothing more than vehicles to go from one action scene to the next. It's a trend that isn't unique to Marvel by any stretch. Everyone seems to be doing it these days, trying to create plots instead of characters. This is a mindset the current writers for Born Again have fallen into, focusing on action over character writing, and this is not just me making assumptions based on watching the show, it's actually something the writers themselves seem to proudly proclaim.
In Punisher, one of our edicts was longer scenes. You had these long 5-page scenes of characters hashing it out in order to make space between these massive action sequences. The way stuff has evolved since then, we're able to do big action sequences at a lot more pace, and at a scope that, for a lot of reasons, Netflix wasn't able to do. In Born Again, there's more fun in the moments with these characters and a lot less navel-gazing than before. We're even more grounded, even less stylized, even more rooted in the here and now.
This is absolutely ridiculous to hear. I want to make it clear that Denario's scarred a pain in my butt had nothing to do with the original Daredevil series at all. He wrote 4 episodes of Punisher over 2 seasons. That's it. It's demeaning to dumb down meaningful character moments as navel-gazing. It diminishes the credit of what made the show so special in the first place. This navel-gazing is what allows us to understand these characters from their dynamics to their weaknesses, their struggles and their flaws. If you have nothing more than fight scenes, you don't have a movie, you have a student showreel. No amount of money, fights and visual effects can fix bad writing. And I don't think this is purely your fault, Denario, because to a degree, this isn't actually his project. Originally Born Again was headed by Chris Hord and Matt Gorman, who also had nothing to do with the original Netflix show. They were signed on to create 18 episodes of Born Again, but apparently it didn't go down too well, which led to the creative overhaul of Born Again, which is what we currently know today, which I would call a Frankenstein's monster of a show, frankly. I would be surprised if you didn't know about the creative overhaul by this point. It's infamous. It's all over the marketing material. We have a lot of information about the pre and post overhaul of Born Again, but the issue is, while these sources are numerous, many of them contradict each other. Almost everyone is ready to throw each other under the bus to clean their hands of this mess. Everyone involved is claiming, well, yeah, it was bad before, but then we came in and fixed all of it, trust us. Jon Bernthal is a really good example of this because he claims that pre-Overhaul was so bad he refused to return as Frank Castle, and he claims he didn't return until after the Overhaul began. But we know that's not true because he was cast before the Overhaul happened. And he even has pre-Overhaul scenes badly edited with ADR.
So what now? Every day Bullseye goes to the chow hall, eats his slop. You know he gets to breathe the same air that you breathe.
Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
And that's kind of the problem. Almost everything we know is almost propaganda rather than behind the scenes documentation, which is, to be frank, quite standard with films and TVs these days. So it's very difficult to piece together all the parts to paint an accurate picture, so you just have to kind of figure out whose testimony fits with the pre- and post-Overhaul interviews. The best I figured out is that there were 6 episodes of Born Again that were filmed out of the planned 18, and they were more tonally similar to She-Hulk than its Netflix predecessor. Each of these episodes were a self-contained story with very little intention for a serialized plot. The cast was almost entirely new, with only Vincent D'Onofrio, Jon Bernthal and Charlie Cox returning, cementing the idea these were new iterations, not a continuation. However, events from the original show would be vaguely referred to, putting events in a sort of Schrodinger's canonical limbo. Vanessa was recast, now played by Sandrine Holt, Karen was banished to the Shadow Realm, and Foggy was originally supposed to die off-screen, killed by a corrupt Punisher cop wearing the Punisher logo 4 years ago, which would have been alluded to in the show's very first scene, which was supposed to tie into the Punisher and White Tiger storyline. That was the plan.
Not a great plan.
But this was before the actors and writers' strike shut down production, delaying the filming of the other 12 episodes. And while this was happening, supposedly the 6 episodes that were filmed didn't go down well with test audiences. Apparently it went so poorly that Feige himself stepped in and ordered a complete creative overhaul. He fired the first creative team when the direction of the show was changed. Because so much money had already been spent filming, they couldn't scrap what they had. Their goal was to rework what they had to the best of their abilities. They had to change the tone, reshoot certain scenes, and try to add new ones to try and make it all fit together, using editing and ADR to try and retool as much as they could of the original footage. They decided to make it canonical to the Netflix show, which required bringing back the old cast to replace the new actors with the original ones, like Vanessa. The season was shaved down to just 9 episodes, with an entirely new pilot, and the original 6 self-contained stories were crunched into one continuous serialized plot with a darker tone. Changing the original tension of many of these scenes creates a very confused tone, as what they were filmed to portray doesn't match the final presentation, and the crushing of 6 self-contained episodes into one story does not create cohesion. It's the exact opposite. It makes events feel more disconnected from each other because they were never designed to be connected. And connecting Born Again to the Netflix show opens up a brand new can of problems, because Born Again is also a continuation of Hawkeye, Echo, and She-Hulk, which were written with the intention for these to be rebooted versions of these characters with new histories that don't align with the Netflix show. That's why in Hawkeye, Fisk is free, why he owns the police again, why he has a different hammer. It's why he's got inhuman strength and durability beyond what Netflix Fisk ever had. It was intended to be a different character entirely. While some people forgive this show because of its infamous production problems, I'm not one of those people. Regardless of what happened behind the scenes, this is still the final product that we got. This is the result of oversight so poor, it may as well be labelled as sabotage. They should have never been forced to retool the original scenes. But the writers are not exactly helping themselves in this situation, because the creative overhaul is where a majority of the problems come from, so they don't get a free pass. There were definitely ways they still could have made many of these elements work if they added new scenes that explore these characters. But considering these are the same writers that were responsible for Loki and Moon Knight, I don't have much hope that any original story they would create would be anything to write home about. This isn't too many cooks in the kitchen, this is cooks burning down the kitchen and then more cooks come in and spray it with napalm. The result is a bloated, incoherent mess full of stories that are the plot equivalent of non sequiturs, moments which are supposed to feel like character beats but go nowhere. which is at least part of the reason why these characters are so empty. To show you the power of bad writing, I cut this character in half and repaired them with only action scenes. Let's see how they hold up. With the new characters, we have Cherry, Kristen, Heather, Daniel, and BB Urich, which get a lot of screen time. These are central characters of the story which affect both Matt and Fisk. Well, in theory. What we have for these characters is basically nothing. And to prove this mathematically, I'm going to break this down. Heather is the best example of this problem because she's supposed to be Matt's new love interest. She's supposed to mean something to him, and I guess she does? But we have no idea why. They don't have chemistry or a history, they don't have shared values, they don't have any development in their relationship at all. When she's introduced, they actually mute the scene, so we have no idea what they're bonding over. They kiss, and now they're together. But this is ridiculous. We're discovering new levels of blank slate here. I've seen relationships developed off-screen, but I've never seen a relationship developed on-screen that is so incredibly empty. She doesn't have motives, morals, or agency. She isn't developed. It's not for lack of screen time. For a majority of her screen time, she's a vessel for Fisk and Vanessa to exposit dialogue to, which, you know, a smart writer can still do something with. A scene can accomplish more than just one thing. And you know all these scenes are reshoots because they have the Netflix Vanessa in them. Later in the story, she changes character on a dime. After being saved by Daredevil and nearly killed by Muse, she turns into a massive Fisk supporter, entirely turning against Matt, even after he throws himself in front of a bullet for Fisk, for reasons that we'll get to that later. Heather seems to be aware that Fisk is a violent and dangerous person. She even asks Vanessa directly if she feels unsafe. And unless she's stupid, she should be more than aware of Fisk's current criminal activities, considering how vague and obvious the couple are around the subject. And you know, their history was front page news. I guess Heather kind of forgot about the last 3 seasons, but she's not alone in that. The entire city seems to apparently have amnesia, but we'll get to that later. So why does she have this opinion of Fisk? Because the anti-vigilante task force saved her life from Muse. But she knows that wasn't true. She knows Fisk is lying, and she's just going along with it, further making her a horrible person. You know, like a liar. Yes, but you see, she had a life-changing experience being attacked by a vigilante. This woman has been traumatized into supporting Fisk. But here's the problem. She knows she wasn't attacked by a vigilante, she was attacked by a violent psychopath, and then saved by a vigilante. This is like me being saved from being hit by a car and gaining a violent hatred of pedestrians, the bastards! Heather is just an awful person. She's completely unreasonable to Matt. She entirely turns cold to him after taking a bullet for Fisk, and I just can't wrap my head around how any of this is supposed to work. What is this relationship? We need to know. This could have still been salvaged. You can still be a bad person and be a well-written character and have well-written relationships. Well, look at Rose Tyler. Maybe Matt is seeking hollow relationships in an attempt to fill the hole in his heart. You can point out that her values don't align with his, and there's really nothing that appealed to him other than a warm body to make him feel less alone. That's really easy to pull off of what we have, and it fits into many of the ideas the show's trying to go with. But they aren't doing that. There is simply nothing here. She gets attacked by a psycho murderer, saved by Daredevil, and suddenly she's the biggest pro-Fisk support on the planet. There is no through line here, especially with all the context surrounding this. So that's Heather. Half blank slate, half feckless arse.
But I'm not done yet!
So, what about Kristen? Kristen is another example of a blank slate. She used to work in the DA's office and worked on a case against one of Foggy's clients. In the opening scene, all we get of her is that she's trying to get information out of Foggy, and that her goal after leaving the DA's office is that she plans to shack up with a big firm. A year later, she's left the DA's office and now she's starting up a brand new law firm with Matt. While this is a little contradictory for her introduction, you might say that it's possible for her conversation with Foggy to change her perspective enough to work with Matt. It's also possible that, similar to Foggy, Matt managed to change her perspective from being career focused to trying to make a change in people's lives, which is why she joined him. But we don't get anything that supports this, or develops her relationship with Matt so that she would want to set up a law practice with him. We don't need flashbacks or anything flashy, just a few lines of dialogue that would help us understand this change in perspective, especially when she's faced with her old boss. Especially when her boss is in heavy conflict with Matt Murdock. You can definitely write a short interaction between the two, establishing why she's changed. The problem is this isn't in the story, she swaps sides for no reason. We need to know why she cares enough about Matt that she would drop everything, giving up her career goals, to start a new law practice with him. The relationship we get between the two is, Matt wants her because she's brilliant, and that's all we really get from how Matt views her. That's how he appeals to her to take on cases she doesn't want to take, revealing more vanity than empathy. In return, she's inappropriately setting him up on dates, which shows interest in his well-being, but seems more like the story wanted to introduce Heather than be a continuing part of her character, because she doesn't actually have any character. Introducing Matt to Heather is her biggest contribution to the story. Calling this bare bones would imply bone density. Considering that she's taking up the place of his new law partner, there needs to be something here. Even just letting her take on the White Tiger case would allow her character to shine through more, which in the original show is where we got some of Foggy's best scenes in development, where he was forced to come out of his shell without hiding behind his own insecurity of his abilities. Other than her law prowess, what makes Matt value Kristen as a person? Why does he approach this woman that he's never met to start a law practice with her? There are many things you can do even with the creative overhaul, building off what is set up with Foggy and her. Maybe a scene where we talk about how that impacted her. Maybe instead of appealing to her brilliance as to why she joined the law firm, appeal to why she wanted to join because she wanted to help people, or just something. Anything. Maybe establish her as being anti-vigilante in a case against a vigilante Foggy is defending. And the major turning point is her being saved by a vigilante in the opening, which would fuel her change of heart. Maybe Foggy dies saving her life in the opening, which ends up giving her survivor's guilt, which is what fuels her on a selfless career trying to do good instead of a career full of financial rewards. I believe in you. You can write this. This isn't that hard. These scenes aren't expensive. They aren't difficult to write. I don't care if you see them as navel gazing. I'm just begging for something. Anything. Just a character. Just one. Daniel. Okay, let's look at Daniel. He's kind of there for reasons. I don't entirely understand why. He's the biggest ass kisser to ever kiss ass, and his only stated motive is, Mayor Fisk, that's so cool. Right, okay, they have no history, they have no shared motive or values. He just sees that Fisk gets things done and then becomes a baby Fisk. Despite how much he buggers up, Fisk still keeps him around. I do not know why. And no, loyalty is not a good enough explanation. It doesn't matter how loyal someone is if they're this incompetent. And my goodness, he's cringe. I guess he's supposed to represent the opinion of the city, maybe even younger voters who are fed up with the system, but there's no reason why anyone in this world would view Fisk this way. Reworking this, if you really want him to be the young character who shows the perspective of the city, explaining why people would vote for Fisk, maybe give him a motive that would align with Fisk's anti-vigilante message. Maybe he's had an experience or grown up in a neighbourhood where vigilantes had a negative effect. Maybe a loved one was killed by a Punisher cop. Maybe he doesn't even trust Fisk but sees him as a means to an end, hearkening to ideas of tactical voting or the lesser of two evils, which is what many people in our own world do. Maybe he's slowly manipulated by Fisk, or just starts to see him in a different light throughout the series, going from someone who was just tactical voting to becoming one of his biggest supporters, because at the moment he just simply has no character or arc. Well, he changes character, sure, but calling that an arc is generous. He's the same character with the same values, but he's doing a Fisk impersonation. It would be generous calling that a character switch. For all his screen time, he doesn't really add anything. He causes problems, kisses ass, and openly flogs himself in front of Fisk. There's simply nothing here. Okay, next. Cherry! Cherry is the character I find the most frustrating because there is so much here. They accidentally set up so much for his character that he could be this show's golden jewel. He's an ex-cop and a friend of Matt who knows his secret. He has a negative opinion of vigilantes and is resentful for how they are viewed and how much credit they get when the cops get villainized. They are the main reason he states as to why he decides to go into retirement. This could tie perfectly into the Punisher Cop storyline, tying their motive as to why they became violent vigilantes. But that's not what we got.
Oh, we were right there, man!
You would think, in a plot about corrupt Punisher cops, masked vigilantes on trial, and Fisk running on an anti-vigilante platform, you think he would have something to say outside of, I like you better as a lawyer than as a vigilante. But why? What drives him to have this opinion? The show has nothing else to say. Cherry's missing perspective on many of these issues is so painful because he would have such a fascinating back and forth with Matt. As an ex-cop, he would fundamentally have a different perspective on the law than a lawyer vigilante on many of these issues. Which isn't new to Daredevil. Brett had his own valid opinions about vigilantism before he and Daredevil saw eye to eye. Foggy had his own opinion on vigilantism before seeing it as a necessity. Cherry could also be a nuanced voice, speaking to the problems caused by vigilantes while also hating Fisk. His stance could put him in conflict with Matt, while he remains a close friend he respects, helping Matt and White Tiger because of his morals, even if he doesn't believe in vigilantism. There's so much potential here that is being ignored. Instead, he's only there to be exposition to serve the plot, making decisions which are questionable for someone with his explicitly stated motives to be doing, including giving a witness drugs that would make his testimony dismissed in court. You think a moral ex-cop would have an issue with giving drugs to a witness. This isn't explicitly contradictory, but we get nothing that would explore this nuance. Another example is that he informs Matt that the NYPD has identified a serial killer known as Muse, and tells him not to go after him, which, again, isn't explicitly contradictory, but you need more to make this work. There has to be a reason why he goes against his explicit motives, undermining the police to give information to Matt while telling him not to do anything about it. And no, Cherry saying that his reasoning is that Matt would hear about it anyway doesn't fix this problem. This is a case the police are keeping incredibly secret. Cherry only knows about this because of his ex-partner being in the room when the mayor is told. This isn't a difficult scene to justify either. Maybe he sees that Daredevil is a necessary evil, despite his opinions about vigilantism. He sees the bad Muse is causing and how the police are being ineffective, and this brings him round to seeing that Daredevil is the only way he can be stopped. We just need to explore his character more. There's already so much you can do with this. You're starting to see the pattern here. It is symptomatic of Born Again refusing to explore or develop any of its characters. They are blank slates who have vague motives, relying on the audience to hopefully not notice they're not actually characters. But just to drive the point home, I'm going to introduce you to BB Urich. BB is the niece of Ben Urich. She's a retcon who doesn't quite fit into what we know about Ben in season 1, but I'll let that slide. She doesn't have a character other than being an expository device. She informs Fisk about the police commissioner resigning with nothing else in that scene. Her news reports give us thoughts and opinions of the public throughout Fisk's election and further, but I'd argue that they grow really pointless after his election is finished. But, we'll keep moving. BB is a bag of nothing. In the show, she's half cozying up to Fisk to undermine him, but actively undermines him in the newspaper to the point where she has to be threatened to play nice. Ben's murder would have been published after Fisk went away in season 1. Karen knew, Matt knew, Ellison knew, and you're telling me this wouldn't be reported? And sure, it's acknowledged that Fisk was accused of murder, but that isn't quite the problem. The problem is that there is no way Fisk wouldn't know that BB knows that he killed her uncle. Right? Surely, this would mean keeping her the hell away from his operations. Revenge is a very powerful motivator, even beyond the threat of death. So keeping her around doesn't seem smart, and it's really not. BB also has a strange relationship with Daniel where she manipulates him for her own purposes, but he's dumb enough to trust her. I guess he's a simp with the memory of a goldfish, but you know what, kind of fair. I can't help but feel this would be somewhat more interesting if they actually did something with that relationship. It doesn't even have to be romantic, it can be one-sidedly romantic or just purely a platonic relationship. Focusing on the moral ambiguity of how she manipulates him would be fascinating. Maybe you could point out how that actively pushes him deeper into Fisk's arms. Maybe her online blog could be anonymous so Daniel has no idea it's her that's been leaking all this information and this big dramatic twist. Ooh. Look, I feel like a starving man in the desert, desperately grasping at any kind of characterization. I'd even take cliched melodrama by this point. You might say, yes, but BB does have an anonymous blog that she's leaking information from, showing that she is playing Fisk. But this is kind of undermined by the fact that she's leaking the exact same information under her own name, and this does technically play into Daniel flogging himself in front of Fisk like a cringe TikTok, but this isn't satisfying because Daniel wasn't actually tricked. BB is very open about her intentions and Daniel is just a dumbass. If you want characters to be driven forward down their arc, it needs to make bloody sense. The reason why I've meticulously pointed out how empty all these new characters are is to point out the flaw in this show's direction. One or two of these would have been fine, you know, they're side characters, they don't need to be the most complex in the world. But they all have less dimension than Tony the Tiger printed onto a cardboard box. The original recurring characters of the Netflix show weren't incredibly complex, but they were nuanced, which made them feel real. Their beliefs made sense, and they served a purpose to the narrative of the story. They challenged the protagonists, fueling conflict. They allowed for introspection and exploration of our main cast, something which none of these characters do, because exploration is not valued by these writers. This doesn't require a heavy amount of screen time, it just requires direction. But direction is a bit of a problem when you've got these tree stumps of old scenes that just go nowhere. But as I've continually explained, there's still plenty that you can do with these characters with what we have so far. All you would need is a few extra scenes to connect these material together. You could drop all these characters from the show and the only thing that would change is that they would get different blank background characters to exposit the same dialogue, because these aren't characters, they're expository devices. It's fascinating how little you can achieve with 8.5 hours. So, all these are garbage, but what about the existing characters? How are they handled? To be frank, not great. Okay then, let's talk about Foggy. I don't think I need a spoiler warning. I think everyone knew exactly what was going to happen to Foggy. They didn't do much of a good job hiding it. How they handle Foggy is another matter. Foggy has regressed in character since we last saw him. He's no longer engaged to Marcy, which was what both characters were moving towards last time we saw them.
I was starting to like the idea of being married to the DA.
Pretty sure Blake Tower's not married.
Well, he'll have to get by without me.
And his opinion of Matt as Daredevil has been regressed back to seeing it as a violent addiction rather than necessity.
I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't want to give you an excuse.
I adore Foggy Nelson, but I went into the show separating from the original in my brain, treating this show as a new thing. But the problem is that treating this as a new character, a different Foggy, means he dies an empty shell. It's entirely reliant on your love for the character from a pre-existing show. His death doesn't mean anything. And when I say that, I don't say he needs to die in some grand final last stand or that he needs to die saving a bus full of orphans, but his death was very out of left field. The show was intending to be shocking by taking you by surprise, but the added side effect to that is that it has no weight behind it. It's not character motivated, it's not based on cause and effect. Comparing this to season 1 of the Netflix show, there is a reason why Ben Urich's death is far more impactful. Because it was based on cause and effect, it was character motivated. Fisk was motivated by revenge for Ben going after his mother for information, which he was roped into doing by Karen's obsession after her traumatic experience, which was then introspected on by Karen which is what makes it meaningful. One thing leads to another, and everyone has a part to play in this orchestra. With Foggy's death, there is no gravity because there is no cause and effect, no themes or lessons for the characters, it simply just happens. The only dialogue that allows us to introspect on what this means for the characters is a year later at Dex's trial. Matt tells us that no justice can ever bring Foggy back and that he misses him, which is vague and unsatisfying. We know Matt misses his friend, but how has that changed his perspective on life? What does it mean to him? In season 3, Elektra dying, again, is what causes Matt to lose faith, and we get so many scenes which explore why Matt had lost his faith. He's been holding back a lot of resentment over the years for everything that's happened to him. Elektra's death is simply the straw that broke the camel's back. And this is great stuff. If character writing was drugs, I'd be sniffing this up like cocaine. In Born Again, we know the facts of what happened. We know it destroyed his relationship with Karen, we'll get to that later. But even then, we don't get anything for how Karen leaving affected him. We know his anger caused him to try to kill Dex, which led him to stop being Daredevil. We'll get to that later. We know he's in pain, but there's an extra step here which is missing, which is fleshing out the effect it has on the character's views. We're left with nothing but vague assumptions which are never resolved. This is a constant problem throughout the show. There is almost no introspection that plays into any of the characters' arcs or develops them. It's like watching an AI script because all these scenes go nowhere. It's the imitation of a story. It has story beats and things happen, but they mean nothing. That's what those navel-gazing scenes were all about. Because when you show the audience what's happening to the character beyond the words that they are simply saying, and when you show what's happening to them purely beyond the surface level, then you have the start of some real character development. And I do want to further explain when I say there is no cause and effect, because I've been talking about that a lot, because we don't even get what caused the event until the very end of the season. And that is still so unsatisfying and destroys so much of the original show within like 30 seconds. But I'll get to whatever bollocks that causes later. That's the problem with this show. Everything is so densely damaged that you can't bring up one thing without having to bring up several other topics. It makes it very frustrating.
There comes a time when a house has been so damaged by termites that you must not only kill the termites, but demolish the house and build again.
So, cause and effect is pretty simple in concept. I think we all get the idea, but I'm just going to explain it anyway. One event leads to the next, and if an event has no cause or skips the effect, the scene stops functioning. Cause and effect ties the story together, and it stops it from becoming random nonsense that happens for the sake of what the writer couldn't be bothered to justify within that moment. And I'll break down what I mean by this. Foggy was working a case where one of his clients received death threats. Foggy then decided not to tell Matt or Karen and stashed them away in his own apartment. Bullseye breaks into Foggy's apartment to kill Benny, Foggy's client. Matt breaks off to try to save Benny after getting changed first. Yeah. Look, the story doesn't treat this like it's a big detour, even though it absolutely should be, but I'll let it slide because this isn't the win the show thinks it is. Bullseye has already got what he wanted out of Benny, teleported past Matt, and is now approaching from a completely different direction. Okay. On top of that, he left Benny alive. He had one job. I'll explain later. But this is one of two things he was supposed to do.
Because when I need a job done, I get someone with a job to do that job.
And if you don't see the problem yet, let me break it down for you. If Foggy had told Matt about the threats to his client, he likely would have been there to stop Bullseye the moment he attacked Benny. Dex's plan falls apart. If Foggy had put Benny in a safe house or stashed him away somewhere sensible, which we can see Matt can do a year later, Bullseye wouldn't have been able to draw Foggy out of the bar to snipe him outside. Dex's plan falls apart. And if Bullseye didn't teleport between Foggy's apartment and the bar, Matt would have likely heard him as they took a similar straight line path between the two locations, and he would have been able to ambush him far away from where he could harm anyone, and Dex's plan falls apart. So, to achieve this outcome, they've made Foggy dumb, regressed his character, and gave Bullseye the ability to teleport, and nobody saw a problem with this. This is all reshoots, by the way. The Overhaul causes all of these problems. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, because now I had to talk about Bullseye. Bullseye has become a flanderization of his Season 3 counterpart. They call back to old lines.
Hello, Karen.
They bring back certain traits. They reference Daredevil 2003 for some reason. And they seem to think that Bullseye has a vendetta against Matt, or specifically Daredevil, which the show thinks makes perfect sense because Daredevil and Bullseye fought in the previous season, so that must mean that they hate each other. But let me break it down for you, Mark. The first problem is that the "hello Karen" doesn't actually mean anything. These two don't have a relationship. It was a way of throwing misdirection to put suspicion on Karen for apparently being familiar with Daredevil after he just went on a killing spree. But hey, it's a reference to make it feel like it's the same character. The OCD Dex had was a trait about him trying to reinforce a structure to keep himself in line, something which, at this point, I don't think he would care about since he's gone off the deep end, but hey, it's a trait we brought back to make it feel like it's the same character. Bullseye doesn't have beef with Daredevil. Bullseye and Daredevil fought because Dex wanted to impress Fisk, and he really didn't care about Daredevil. He was only ever someone that was in the way. If anything, after being exposed to what Fisk did, Dex should view Daredevil neutrally. The only thing he did against him was to stop him from killing Vanessa. But Born Again acts like this is the only natural conclusion, that Dex would want to kill Foggy to get back at Daredevil, despite that he doesn't have any reason to and doesn't even know his real identity. But hey, it's a rivalry we brought back to make it feel like it's the same character. Dex is coy about his motives. Whenever anyone asks why he shot up the bar, all he ever says is,
I'll never tell.
The funny thing is, his real motive is actually worse. So, because of Nadim's death and the FBI corruption scandal, Dex can go free, acquitted of all crimes. Listen, just come here, just come here. I'll get to whatever bollocks that causes presently. I can't afford to get off track here. Vanessa specifically says she will give Dex his freedom if he kills Benny and his lawyer Foggy. Only half of this he actually does. This doesn't make any sense because Vanessa would know she's the one woman Dex would kill without hesitation to get back at Fisk. A free Dex would never stop hunting her and her husband. Why is she doing this? She needs him drugged up and restrained. Benny and Foggy are not high-risk targets. You can get any old bugger to kill these two. Most importantly, why would Dex even go through with this? The moment he was freed, he would have gone after Vanessa. Why would he even care about holding up his own end? This is what I mean when I say these characters don't have motives, because what their motives are and what they are doing don't align. Dex is more than happy to follow through on his motive the moment it benefits the plot to add stakes to the story, and until then, he just does whatever the story demands. Again, breaking the illusion that this is in fact a character. Before moving on to Matt, I do want to quickly elaborate on Karen's reaction to Foggy's death. When we catch up with Matt a year later after Foggy's death, we learn that Karen has been out of his life completely. She disappeared and moved to LA, only returning for the trial. Also, on a random note, just come here. It is a little annoying that at the trial, none of Foggy's family are there. It's a nitpick, kind of, but it's a detail that would have been greatly appreciated. So, moving on. We learn that after Foggy's death, Matt went silent on Karen for 3 weeks, and when he finally reached out to her, she decided to avoid him for an entire year, which is very odd for these two characters. When Karen thought she lost Matt, she didn't shut out Foggy and everyone else she knew. She relied on them more for emotional support. The fact that either of these two characters turned cold to each other in a moment of tragedy is entirely antithetical to their arcs in Season 3. Season 3 is about Matt learning to be closer with his friends during hard times, rejecting Stick's advice to go it alone. After Father Lantern's death, which was caused by Matt pushing away his friends, Matt realises that he should stop pushing away his friends in moments of tragedy because pushing them away only hurts them, and they are far stronger together. This is a very common thread throughout Born Again, where themes and lessons from 3 seasons of television lay shattered because, in reality, they were all proven wrong, or they simply didn't learn those lessons, making those lessons entirely pointless. Now, maybe you're starting to see why I'm a little bit mad at this show, and perhaps why I didn't enjoy it compared to some other people. But to start digging deeper into the show's much more egregious problems, I'm going to start talking about that scene. Throughout Netflix's Daredevil, one central and recurring conflict remains consistent: Matt's moral struggle. He is a deeply moral person facing an impossible question. What do you do when the law fails? When the courts don't work, when the prisons can't hold the guilty, and when the powerful have built institutions to shield themselves from consequences, how do you stop them? There is a simple answer: ask Luigi. But Matt struggles with this question because he doesn't see any alternative. He sees the law as failing people, but refuses to take the simple solution. He instead walks a very fine line, trying to know when and where to break the law. This puts him at conflict with both Foggy and Frank Castle. Foggy sees this as a betrayal of the values and the faith in the law he thought they both held. Foggy has a pretty hardline stance that the problem should be solved entirely within the confines of the law, but as Matt points out, that doesn't always work. Frank Castle has, let's say, an alternative viewpoint, that the system simply doesn't work, and that Daredevil is naive and is simply not going far enough. Killing criminals is the fastest and simplest solution, and they're getting what they deserve, and what he does keeps criminals scared. But killing is not a solution Matt will accept. From a young age, he was taught to believe that no one is beyond redemption, and that taking a life is a sin, no matter whose life it is. It robs them of their chance of redemption. This strings from the belief in the sanctity of life, the idea that life is sacred and should be protected. That is the core belief of Matt Murdock. It's the core of everything he stands for that pushes him to constantly put his life in danger. Remember, it is dangerous for him to have these values. He is just a man. He doesn't have super strength or super durability or super healing. It's much easier for a character like Superman not to kill when his life isn't in danger from every guy with a gun. Which is what makes the show so interesting, because he is just a man, because that belief is constantly challenged, because he doesn't always have an answer. The solution is complicated and elusive. He has to work so much harder just to find it. While Matt struggles with the answer, the show does support him. It shows that Frank's solution isn't as clean as advertised. His massacre left a trail of grief and pain. In killing these criminals, he's inadvertently harmed innocent people, because people aren't isolated, they spread out to those around them, and that death is still a tragedy. Even if those people did something bad, do they deserve that? Do their families deserve that? But, you may cry, what about guiding Nadim's gunshots? What about Matt killing Nobu? Isn't Matt a hypocrite? Well, yes, but actually no. Yes, Matt guided Nadim's gunshots to injure armed assailants with the risk of killing them. Yes, Matt maneuvered Nobu into accidentally killing himself, which is not technically killing him, in the same way that if I push someone into traffic, it's not technically me killing them either. And this is a problem because I don't believe the show adequately addresses this apparent contradiction, especially in season 2, but I'm going to ignore that for a second. However, I do not believe this is impossible to explain. Perhaps this isn't actually against Matt's moral code. I know that's a strange thing to say. It's called a no-kill rule and he killed someone. It seems pretty black and white. But calling this a no-kill rule is attempting to simplify his values into words, and whether or not it contradicts his values is far more important than if it contradicts his words. Matt's no-kill rule is perhaps better expressed as no murder or execution rule, and that the sanctity of life should be valued, and that the intent should never be to kill unless there is no choice. So, what makes Agent Nadim, Matt and Karen different from Frank? Well, you see, it's contextually different. Frank is killing purely out of vengeance masked as utility. What he stands for goes against the sanctity of life that Matt cares so much about. Agent Nadim, Matt and Karen aren't taking life lightly and still value the sanctity of life. It's only a last resort to protect themselves when they physically have no other option. Meanwhile, Frank is more than happy to apprehend a criminal and execute him when he's no threat to anyone. A criminal who's repentant and regrets what he did. And there is a reason why Matt holds himself to such a high standard, much higher than the standards he applies to those around him. Matt Murdock is a character with a lot of pent-up rage and anger that he hides deep inside. There is a part of him that does doubt his own intentions. He fears that if pushed too far, he will lose control like his father did in the boxing ring. He's terrified that Frank is right, that he's just one bad day away from snapping. He makes up for this by being so hard on himself, but the truth is, despite his fears, Matt isn't violent or angry because he's a bad person. He's angry because of how deeply moral he is. It's a righteous anger caused by living in an unjust world, a world he's unable to shut out unlike everyone else around him, and that tears him apart. He's confronted by a world he can't ignore, which is what drives him to do good. And that's why he can never disregard the sanctity of life. Despite his fears, it's simply not within his character. Despite his morals being challenged for 3 seasons, he's never been able to do it. We've seen Matt push to his most extreme. In season 3, Fisk is threatening the lives of Foggy and Karen. He's responsible for Dex killing the closest thing he had to a father for most of his life. He had his hands around Fisk's neck. The moment he was waiting for, the moment he dreamed of. Fisk is taunting him to do it, and he still couldn't execute him. Fisk, at his most powerful, couldn't destroy Matt. He couldn't make him go against his morals. The fact that he couldn't kill Fisk, even when pushed to such an extreme, speaks volumes to his character, because he's not beating on criminals as some dark desire. He's not simply morally thumping his chest. He can stay true to his beliefs when the chips are down. Frank was wrong about Matt. He could never be him. There is no point that he could be ever pushed to become him. It is antithetical to his nature, and that's what makes this such a fantastic moment, a final beat to Matt's moral conundrum, the accumulation of 3 seasons. There is always a way. He fought tooth and nail, dragging himself to every barrier Fisk could put in his way, and he beat him. And he never broke his moral code to do it. What a fantastic moment of... Bloody hell. Almost immediately, 3 seasons of television were thrown off a roof and beaten into a fine paste. A season of television about how Frank was wrong about Matt made void because instantly Frank was right. He was one bad day away. And that's all it took for Matt to betray his morals. In Matt's own words, it destroyed who he is.
To shreds, you say?
His conflict in season 2 is now just him morally thumping his chest, because he's a hypocrite. Frank had his entire family killed, and while Matt is very close with Foggy, it's not even close to having your wife and children killed in front of you, so it just kind of tarnishes that better way that Matt is supposed to uphold, and that insists Frank should uphold, when he can't even follow it himself, and it leaves a very sour taste in my mouth. Ah, but you see, it's realistic. It makes Matt more human because he is a hypocrite, and that he would kill when pushed to such an extreme. You can make a story about a hero when pushed to an extreme is incapable of holding their own standards. And you can show that being flawed doesn't disprove the value, and that would make for a very interesting and human story. But connecting it to this specific continuity, you're bulldozing all the previous arcs, all the themes and conflicts, for this new show when arguably this isn't even the lowest Matt has been. Foggy means a lot to Matt, but comparing to losing Elektra twice, Stick, and Violet Lantern, and also having to struggle with a solution for what to do about Fisk, I do not believe losing Foggy comes anywhere close to bringing Matt that low. Even if we ignore this, and say that this is a realistic reaction, it's not a satisfying narrative choice for Matt's character when it compares to the end of season 3. And you can say, well, wouldn't you do that in real life if someone killed your friend? But the major difference between Daredevil and the real world is that we don't exist in a well-structured narrative connected by a theme, and characters are fundamentally more simplistic than real people, not just for the sake of making writing easier, but also to help write a more satisfying narrative. And at the end of the day, no matter how you try to justify this, the original themes, messages, and conflict of the first 3 seasons are shattered by this decision. There is no way you can fix this. It is just simply antithetical to the previous show. Okay, so let's just ignore all that for a second. Why did they do this?
The obvious question is, why did we do this?
What narrative purpose does Matt breaking his morals serve? What's the theme? What's the message? What's his lesson? The narrative purpose was to get Matt to stop being Daredevil. There is no moral this serves, there is no theme, there is no message. The only interpretation I can come up with for this character arc is that Matt is afraid of himself, afraid of what he could do if he crosses the line again. He doubts his own motives so much that he ignores cries for help, which is very out of character for Matt, who is motivated by the fact that he is unable to ignore the injustice happening around him. But at the end of this, when he returns to being Daredevil, what was learned? What convinced him to stop being afraid of himself? There is no lesson or growth from this event, because he's the exact same character as he was before. Well, in theory, you do have to ignore the fact that his IQ is very low, but all this amounts to is a small vacation from being Daredevil. There is no lesson or growth from fear or self-doubt, because before the creative overhaul, Matt didn't cross the line. The reason why he stopped being Daredevil was because Foggy's death made him too sad to continue. But again, to fix this, all you need is a few scenes of character introspection. It only takes a handful of scenes to complete this arc. I just want to take a moment to compare this to a similar arc in Daredevil Season 3, where similarly, Matt is stumbling. He's pushing away his friends, losing his faith, giving up on his identity as Daredevil, giving up being Matt Murdock. If you squint enough, it could be viewed as character regression, but there is one defining difference in the fact that this season is full of character growth and lessons. Yes, Matt stumbles and goes through hardships, but he comes out of it concluding his own internal conflicts which he battled for 3 seasons. He stops pushing away his friends, he stops doubting himself, and stops fearing his own motive. He loses his resentment for all the bad things that happened to him throughout his life, and most importantly, he is reaffirmed in his belief that there is always a solution beyond murder and execution. This leads him to be stronger and wiser for the conflict he went through, and this isn't even all the character work directly tied to Matt within this season. Compare this to Born Again, where he is neither stronger nor wiser for this stumble, and there is no other character work for Matt besides this. Simply because the status quo has changed is trying to trick you into thinking that the characters are going on some kind of journey, but fundamentally, all you've done is regress the characters and put them in the exact same position they started from. It's entirely pointless.
My back!
My ground!
Matt Murdock is a shallow shadow of his former self. His decisions are nonsensical, but they happen to work anyway for the sake of the plot. All his conflicts are contrived for cheap drama. The illusion that this entire story is built on cause and effect crumbles like wet cake. It's an arbitrary world where conflict happens that the writers can't be bothered to justify. Characters will do things that don't make any sense to add drama to the story, and it just happens to work for reasons that are contradictory to what the story is trying to tell us. And the perfect example of this is the White Tiger case. A man named Hector Ayala is coming home on the subway and encounters 2 people beating on a random guy. He decides to intervene, and oopsie, one of the men slips and runs into a train. Only after this does one of the men reveal his badge. Hector is now charged with assaulting and killing a police officer, and Matt takes the case to defend Hector. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not knowledgeable about American law, and I'm not up to date with the ins and outs of the fictional Marvel Universe legal system. This is a very valid discussion to have, but I am simply unqualified to discuss it, and even if I spent the time researching all of this, it'd be a lengthy explanation for someone to dismiss it as, we don't need it to be 100% accurate, that's boring. I've actually had someone argue that to me. So instead, I'm going to approach this from the angle of the show's storytelling, its cause and effect, and even its character work. But I'll be mentioning the basic rules of law, since that's the lowest standard for a law show. If you do want a full legal breakdown, check out Southpaw's video. He's done a lot of research on the particular topic that I'm simply unable to do, and that will be in the description. Hector is in a bit of a bind. It's a case in which it's purely Hector's word against Officer Powell. There is only one witness, nobody knows who he is, and there is no CCTV footage. This isn't the first time that Matt has been in this situation. In Daredevil Season 1, he was forced to defend a guilty man who committed murder. The DA was forced to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it wasn't self-defense. It was revealed later that the jury was rigged, but the story also treats this like it would have been a very reasonable defense that would have been in their favour anyway. This is a similar situation. Unless stated otherwise, these are the rules in which the story has established. That is also a rule so basic it's the standard for almost every legal story set in America, so I'm going to hold it to the exact same standard that it's up to the DA to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't self-defense. That's how it was in Season 1, that's how it was in Season 2, and that's how it's going to be here. But we've already hit a few contrived points. Now, I do not live in New York, however, a little birdie that does tells me that New York, on New Year's Eve, is packed full of people, especially in the subway. The New York subway is heavily monitored. There are CCTV cameras everywhere, So, you're telling me that not only is this fight not caught on camera, there aren't any CCTV cameras in the whole area that caught this guy booking it from the subway. Even if CCTV footage of him running away from the subway isn't direct evidence, it's enough evidence to place him at the scene, which is a very important thing to do to prove this is in fact a witness that lines up with your story. It's also awkward how the police officer trips into the train. The way he runs, it's like he was not slowing down. If the body wasn't there, he would just run into the train anyway, like he was intending to kill himself, but that's just bad choreography. It's also awkward that Powell doesn't just shoot Hector here and now claiming self-defense. He's shown that he's perfectly willing to kill 2 people to avoid Hector going free, so I'm not sure why he doesn't extend this to Hector himself. It's not impossible, there can be nuances to this, but I'm just adding it to the pile. But let's say this is correct and there is absolutely no CCTV footage and that there are no witnesses and we just ignore the awkward direction of the scene that makes it look like he just intentionally killed himself. Matt desperately needs to find the sole witness. Officer Powell and his buddy are going to kill the sole witness, but Matt manages to get there before him. Matt decides to stick around either to buy time or gloat, but this puts his life in danger as now the cops are going to kill him, forcing him to defend himself. Ignoring the horrible fight choreography and the atrocious editing of the scene, and the horrible way the episode ends. I didn't edit that, by the way, that's actually how it ends. These 2 are still alive. He didn't kill them as much as a snapping sound would lead you to believe. This is pretty serious. Matt was just forced to reveal himself to save his own life in front of 2 corrupt Punisher cops. This should be a massive red flag to them. In their eyes, not only is he not blind, but he's also an incredible fighter. This puts a massive hole through Matt's cover story, as being blind is fantastic for dispelling any suspicions of being Daredevil. They are already willing to kill both the witness and the attorney to make sure Hector goes to jail. Matt thoroughly embarrassing them would absolutely put him on their radar. But the cops don't seem to actually care. They vaguely threaten him, but have no interest in the apparently blind lawyer who just kicked their ass and is defending the guy they want dead. But this is all unfortunately for naught. While the witness admits he's an off-the-books informant, he denies being in the subway at that time. Matt knows he's lying, don't worry, it's a blind thing, and he's acting out of fear. This isn't optimal, but this shouldn't be a problem. This isn't the first time Matt has had a witness who he has put on the stand who hasn't given the testimony that he's supposed to give. There is a very simple solution that Matt has used before, treating the witness as hostile. You pressure them into giving the testimony they're supposed to give, but Matt simply gives up.
Open sesame! Well, I've done all I can do.
Okay, maybe he just wants to regroup and give it another go. Maybe he just wants to make sure the witness doesn't feel pressured by the police. Maybe he can prove he's being intimidated. Maybe he wants to go and find evidence that could be submitted to the court that would tie him to the scene by proving that he wasn't actually home and he was in the area of the subway, which with the court's permission, you're allowed to do. Maybe he wants to take this from a new angle. There is the fact that Powell is part of the Punisher cops. It's pretty obvious, he's got a freaking tattoo. This is a group of cops which are apparently well known within the police force. And if only we had an ex-cop with a partner inside the NYPD that would be knowledgeable on this subject. This would easily break the case open. These cops have a violent history, which is very easy to point out. This is a group which have been disciplined for their violent actions. Considering how quickly Powell is ready to shoot unarmed civilians, his record probably is not clean. You can absolutely use his record against him, regardless of if he's aware of the Punisher cop group. But instead, Matt Murdock does nothing, because while there are logical and legal ways Matt can get out of this predicament, the plot has different ideas. At the start of the case, Matt discovered Hector was the vigilante called the White Tiger. He immediately submitted this information to the court to block the district attorney from using this against Hector, which was granted. But it's also strange that he did this, because there was absolutely no evidence that he was the White Tiger other than the suit under his bed. This is a very easy problem to solve. Hide the suit. There is no other evidence linking the two. Matt is worried that being a vigilante would be used against Hector to demonstrate a history of violence. With Hector being the White Tiger now suppressed, the district attorney is blocked from using it as evidence, and so is Matt Murdock.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
But with his only witness lying, he feels that he has no option. Against a court order, he reveals that Hector is the Pink Panther to the entire courtroom. causing a massive uproar, and rightfully so, since, you know, he's not allowed to do that. It's immoral and illegal. That's not even a legal technicality or an argument about accuracy, because the story itself establishes this as something that is strictly forbade. And if we are talking about legal accuracy, I'm told this would legally be a nuke to Matt's legal career, and a nuke to his case, opening him up to many lawsuits. Everyone around Matt is entirely right on how hypocritical and immoral this decision is, but Matt basically ignores them and there are no repercussions for this. But regardless of legal accuracy, it doesn't make sense. All Matt has to do is make sure the DA can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't self-defense. Exposing White Tiger does not help further these goals, it only helps the opposition. He wants to build a character reference to prove he's not the kind of man to attack someone for no reason, but as the opposition rightly points out, this isn't black and white. Someone can go out and do these good deeds and still attack and kill someone. And this especially shouldn't help Matt's case when the city is apparently so anti-vigilante, they voted for a last-second write-in candidate who is an unpopular, well-documented criminal who ran solely on a single-issue platform of being anti-vigilante.
You propose registering the vigilantes. That's like making a grocery list of cancers.
I know simultaneously, the show tries to present that vigilantes are solely needed throughout the city, but this runs contradictory to the election of Fisk. Even if this is just a contentious issue where people are heavily split, this is still a terrible idea because the likelihood that the jury would be biased against vigilantes would be high. Not to mention, the last thing you'd want to do is paint a target on your client's back. Not only does White Tiger have enemies, the mayor is going after vigilantes and this would draw his attention to the case. And many of Hector's enemies would be more than happy to use those he loves against him. Matt should know this, it's the same reason why his own secret identity is so important. It's so incredibly painful that even Matt Murdock in She-Hulk gets this right.
As public figures, it is assumed that there will be some loss of privacy.
The distinction here is we're not talking about celebrities. We're talking about superheroes who have enemies who will try to harm them, and the people close to them, the ones who didn't ask to be a part of this life. If this information is not protected, it could put a lot of people in a lot of danger.
This is canonically the exact same character. What were they thinking? The story acts like as long as Hector stops being White Tiger, he will be safe. But that's not how being safe works. But this strategy works. For some reason, this convinces the jury to let Hector go. The problems I've pointed out with the mounted contrivances and illogical decisions are not unique to this show. Actually, I'll take that back. All but the massive nuke to Matt's intelligence are not unique to this show. But there is simply so much around the facts of this case that is a death by 1,000 cuts. All of these illogical decisions and contrivances are all because the story wants to have a dramatic ending without earning it. A dramatic ending where Hector is killed by the corrupt Punish cops out of revenge. The funny thing is that as much as the story pretends, this didn't need to happen. Matt could have used any of the paths out of this problem that I have laid out and the story would retain the important parts, which is that Hector goes free but gets killed out of revenge. But to get to the ending that we have to contrive all possible evidence that could defend Hector out of existence. We contrive a lack of witnesses, contrive a lack of evidence for the only witness, poorly choreograph a death, make the police ignore the fact that Hector's blind lawyer kicked their ass, make the sole witness switch sides on a dime, and make Matt give up any alternatives and flip the cards, doing something incredibly illegal, stupid, and immoral that works for no reason, which ends up getting his client shot in the street. The cherry on the cake is that Matt exposing Hector as White Tiger allowed them to set a trap for him, making Matt responsible for his death. And the story never acknowledges this, acting like it's somehow his choice that got him killed, that he would have been fine as long as he didn't put the suit on again, and that he simply just couldn't resist the call to being a vigilante. But that's acting like in Iron Man 3 after Tony gives his home address to a terrorist that he would be safe as long as he doesn't put the suit on. That's the problem with an exposed identity, that once exposed, you'll never be safe. That's the point of the secret, and Matt is the one who exposed him publicly to the world. This isn't just appealing for more legal accuracy, I'm appealing for morality and common sense. People praise this plot, but the moment you stop to think about it, it crumbles faster than bad flapjack. Stories should be based on cause and effect. Characters should do things that are believable and reasonable for them to do considering their motives. And when they do things which are immoral, they should either be punished or they should contemplate their choices. Literally everyone recognises the weight of this action other than Matt, who refuses to contemplate what he did and isn't punished for it. Regardless of what everyone else thinks, somehow the story seems to view that he's in the right. In Netflix's Daredevil, we saw that Matt's actions made sense for his motives at the time, even if they were immoral actions, and the story doesn't just ignore them. When Matt's inaction led to Melvin Potter getting arrested, he contemplated his actions. When Matt pushed away his friends, he was punished. When he went to go kill Fisk in season 1, he was punished and he contemplated what he was going to do. There is none of that here. While the Punisher cops killed Hector, you can't ignore the role that Matt played in his demise. In Born Again, Matt Murdock as a character is, well, he's empty at best, and at worst, he's entirely nonsensical. His story is about his return to being Daredevil as events keep pushing Matt further and further, where he keeps witnessing injustices, forcing him to act until he eventually reclaims his mask. This is a 6-episode arc trying to be a triumphant return to him being Daredevil, but all this arc entails is Matt being begrudgingly involved in disconnected events until the end of episode 6, where he puts on the mask again, and after that there is no more arc or further development. And what is the solution to this arc? What stops Matt from being afraid of himself? What proves him wrong? Or is it really just an arc where Matt should learn to stop pitying himself and actually fucking get off his ass and do something? Is that really what you want to go for, show? And even this arc, it's not enough development, it's not enough exploration of his character. There needs to be far more than just this. Beyond Matt being a passive character being involved in disconnected events, he needs a motive to push him forward in the story actively. He needs character development and for the writers to develop his relationships with the people around him. And the story needs to resolve the reason why he stopped being Daredevil, because that's how character arcs work. If this is supposed to be a massive block that stops Matt from being Daredevil, in order to make that a satisfying narrative, there has to be a reason why he overcomes it. Otherwise, we may as well have watched Matt Murdock waiting around on the beach having a small vacation, just ignoring all the bad things that happen around him until he decides, yeah, maybe it's about time I actually do something. Because that's what we got. It all equally contributes to his character arc, and by that I mean it doesn't at all. That's why I said you could skip most of this season. And they definitely needed to turn this into some kind of lesson, just like what season 3 did. Otherwise his vacation is pointless because there is no growth resulting from it. This is not acceptable for 7.5 hours of television, especially from a sequel to a show which is heavily praised for its character writing. Before we get onto Fisk, I do want to speak a little bit about Frank Castle and the Punisher Cops, and if that isn't a band name I've ever heard one. Frank Castle has reverted back to his season 2 characterization, ignoring 3 seasons of growth since the rooftop debate. By the end of season 2, Frank and Matt had developed a respect for each other, an understanding, but they've both reverted back to their relationships at the beginning of season 2, with a poor attempt to recreate the rooftop debate. But hey, it's a conflict we brought back to make it feel like it's the original show. But the reason why this has happened is because it was another pre-Overhaul scene that was never intended to be the same character from Daredevil and the Punisher show. And if the creative overhaul wasn't done adding problems, it throws a wrench into Frank Castle's main scene. As I stated before, pre-Overhaul, Foggy would originally been killed by a Punisher cop, not Bullseye. And originally, Matt didn't try to kill him. So this scene where Frank is challenging Matt would have made sense. Not only did a Punisher cop kill his friend, but now another one has killed one of Matt's clients, making it relevant to the conversation at hand, and Frank challenges Matt for not killing him. But with Bullseye now killing Foggy, not only is this scene now a non sequitur that has nothing to do with what they're talking about, it's incorrect. Matt claims he ran down Bullseye and handed him to the police, but not only did he not hand him into the police, Frank acts like he didn't go further. Like he already knows everything that happened, and Matt has no argument against this and acts like Frank is right that he didn't go further to avenge his friend.
That's why he's eating at you. That's why he's eating at you, because you know you didn't do a goddamn thing, and it's gonna keep eating at you. It's gonna keep eating and eating.
You hate yourself. He's eating you up because you ain't done a goddamn thing about it.
But he did. He threw him off a rooftop. The fact he tried to kill him is what stopped him from being Daredevil. That's the problem. That's his inner conflict. That's his arc. The fact he tried to kill someone out of revenge that goes against everything he held dear. This scene should have been the exact opposite, talking about how Matt tried to kill someone and he's upset about that fact, instead of it's eating him up that he didn't go far enough, because that's not what happened. And you know, it's not like Frank can talk about not doing anything. He hasn't done anything about the Punisher cops killing innocent people in his name. That's not something he would ever be okay with. And these are a group of cops which are very brazen about their actions. They literally wear the logo on their sleeves, or well, their wrists and neck to be specific. They are well known within the police, and there is no way that he's only made aware of them because of Matt Murdock. And still, after that, it's not only until 5 episodes later that he actually decides to do anything about them. The Punisher cops themselves are also very awkward. I'd go as far as saying they're pretentious. Fiction is a really good place for political allegory. I'm a massive fan of Doctor Who and Star Trek, which does this extraordinarily well, or well, they used to.
The grown-ups are talking!
However, one thing you can't do is throw in political allegories, or well, in this case, just literally cut and paste the real world into fiction where it doesn't make sense. Yes, Punisher cops exist within our own world. Cops who only see the cool visuals and have idealized the broken morals of a fictional anti-hero and applied them to themselves because they're either cringe, have broken morals, or are just power-hungry twats. But within the realms of fiction, there are contexts that differ from our real world. For instance, Frank isn't a fictional character in the world of Daredevil. In their world, he's a one-man army who terrorized their city, who was framed as a cop killer and even killed corrupt cops. There is no way corrupt cops would idolize this man, especially so brazenly, especially in a police department that is heavily resentful of vigilantes. You can't just ignore your own bloody continuity that you establish. Them joining Fisk as basically his own private lawless army, I'm very mixed on. Because ignoring how the mayor can't do that, while it makes sense that power-hungry assholes would be attracted to the idea of being able to do whatever they want, what little exploration they do have within one scene seems to heavily establish that their motives are that they are tired of criminals getting away with crimes and not being punished. You know, like Fisk. And while this could be a justification for being violent, it would be difficult for them to justify working for Fisk. This justification seems very important to them because they do have a genuine affection and admiration for Frank Castle. So there doesn't really seem to be a reason they could ever justify working for Fisk, regardless of what they gain. Ah yes, but the show itself states that half the cops love Fisk, so that means they have a positive opinion of him. Listen, Fisk is also a cop killer to a much higher degree than Frank Castle. All of these cops left in the NYPD would hate Fisk for corrupting the police back in season 1. You see how the context for both the previous show and this show makes things very messy. This doesn't work. For their presence in the show, while they play a part in many events and become Fisk's anti-vigilante task force, their presence doesn't mean anything. It's not speaking to anything that inspires power-hungry people like this. They are simply power-hungry. There is no deeper meaning or characterization. They are stormtroopers who do nothing and die easily. That doesn't justify political allegory when you do nothing with that allegory. When there are no themes or characterization, and this would be somewhat of an easy fix if you turn Officer Powell into a side character who we see the perspective of. That's such an easy way to explore this nuance, showing that maybe some of them aren't happy with this because they still follow that justification that they hold in their head, while they see that others are just more than happy to abuse that power.
Are we the baddies?
You could even humanize Powell more than the rest of the Punisher cops, as maybe they start going too far and that awakens him to what they were doing, or maybe you just have him slowly fall deeper down that rabbit hole. But we never see that because Powell isn't a character, which makes him, well, not too different from most of the characters in this show. But while I've gone through a synopsis of every other character and their problems, there is one character I've been saving to last, because he's easily the character who causes the most damage to the world, and that character is of course Fisk.
Come on, let me hear you say it just once. Come on.
Fisk is a malignant tumor. While the state of New York isn't gonna make the same mistake.
No! No, the other thing. Come on, I know it's just dangling off the tip of your tongue. Let me hear it just once, please.
Everyone knows his game now. Fisk won't manipulate the system again.
The Mayor Fisk plot takes up about half the season, and it's about him tackling the challenge of taking office. There is a lot you can do with this. Fisk is a very politically savvy guy. He manipulated himself into 2 criminal empires, one of which where he owned the police, and the other where he controlled the FBI. He's not alien to political maneuverings. But in this show, pretty much every challenge he faces is, "Sir, you can't do that, that's not within your power," and he doesn't care and he tells him to do it anyway. Glad all these problems could be solved, super easy, barely an inconvenience. For a second I thought Fisk would have to be intelligent to tackle these challenges. Little did we know, the mayor's word is law. Anything goes. Apparently he can even shut down the entire city and nobody cares.
But we can't! I am mayor! I am law!
See, nobody cares.
Not only is that not how being mayor works, but also part of Fisk's appeal was how he would intelligently solve problems, not just bulldoze his way through them. From his lowest to his most powerful, that's what made him difficult to contain, making the story interesting. There is nothing interesting about a character who gets everything that they wanted handed to them on a plate. It ruins his appeal. I can't tell if fans of Born Again actually ever cared about Fisk, or are just so nostalgic they never realise he never does anything intelligent in this show and is actively characterised as a buffoon who has no political understanding and uses brute force to get what he wants instead of tactics. Do you prefer a villain who just gets whatever they want without working for it? The world just bends around him giving whatever he demands, even if it doesn't make any bloody sense. Because that's what we got. That's what you're praising. On top of that, Fisk being mayor is very odd. He's an unpopular convicted criminal who, last we saw, was in prison with no hopes of getting out. Which leaves us with 3 very important questions. How did he get out of prison? Why does he want to be mayor? And why are people voting for him? The first question we do have an answer for. Fisk is out of prison as he was acquitted of all wrongdoing because of the FBI corruption scandal. The FBI corruption scandal he caused. Yeah, no, I don't buy that. If Fisk got out immediately after season 3, not only is that ending destroyed because it's no longer an ending, everything that happened was pointless. Nadim's death was pointless. Everyone just decided to pack up and go home, then did nothing while Fisk went free the next day. The FBI apparently didn't care that Fisk made complete fools of them. Matt, Foggy and Karen apparently don't care that Fisk walked free. After everything he did, after everything they sacrificed, they gave up. What planet are we on? Matt had Fisk by the balls. He could turn his wife into a fugitive and make sure he never sees her again. And if you're telling me, oh, well she would also get acquitted for ordering the murder of Nadim because of the FBI corruption scandal, you're missing one very important factor. That leaves Matt with no way to protect his friends. Fisk would have unleashed all hell on them. He hates Karen for killing one of his closest friends. He hates Matt for standing in his way and destroying his empire. And no doubt he's going to be pretty pissed off that Matt sent an assassin to his wedding. But no, these are 2 perfectly fine. Don't know what you're on about. This is perfectly amicable now. There's no issues at all. Fisk totally wouldn't have murdered Matt and his friends the moment he had the opportunity. But for some reason, that never happened. The reset button was switched the moment the cameras turned off. He went straight back to owning the police, to owning a criminal empire like nothing happened. It barely stopped him at all. There is no better way. He truly is too powerful to be kept behind bars. The system is broken. Matt doesn't have an answer to stop him. He let him rule the underworld for 7 years unopposed, and he only vaguely starts threatening him after he starts running for mayor. And I haven't even gotten to the part that makes me mad yet. I've spoken at length about how Matt Murdock attempting to kill Bullseye destroys Matt's arc and conflict. But this show also destroys Matt's central argument and one of the core themes of season 3 which ties heavily to many of the characters. And that is the idea of redemption, the idea that nobody is too far gone to change their path. Matt Murdock has a redemption, Karen has a redemption, Nadim has a redemption. Born Again keeps running parallels between Fisk and Matt as Fisk tries to be a better man while beating up a man in his basement and running a criminal empire, and Matt tries to resist being Daredevil, but the two of them keep sliding back into their habits. The show thinks this is a very poignant and deep parallel to draw. Even White Tiger himself very clearly states that he's unable to change his nature, even for his and his family's safety. None of these characters are able to escape their nature, which, if you haven't noticed, goes against the entire concept of redemption. Considering how character, plot, and theme are the three core elements of storytelling, it's amazing how you've managed to bugger up all three of those elements at the same time.
Good job.
The first time Fisk escaped prison was pushing Matt's ideology. It shook him deeply and made him seriously question if what he was doing was actually doing anything to stop Fisk. But it was also earned by showing us how Fisk escaped prison. But this is going too far, and it is unearned. While logistically, you can technically have Fisk be free, if you earn his escape and give us a reason why Matt can't go after Vanessa. Have Fisk calling Matt's bluff, putting them at a stalemate. Fisk can't go after Matt because he will make Vanessa a fugitive, and Matt can't go after Fisk because otherwise he will destroy him and everything he loves. But this is nothing to fix the major issue in the room. Not only would Fisk escaping prison again completely destroy Matt's ideological outlook, it would make the entire theme and message and character work of season 3 be entirely pointless and wrong. There is no way that Matt can be right when all he does is temporarily stop him. And running the exact same conflict, a conflict that was supposed to be resolved for a third season, would definitely become tedious. But Born Again kinda gets around this by just refusing to acknowledge it. Like, Matt barely even thinks about Fisk for a majority of the season. If you're bringing Fisk back, he needs to provide something new. And, you know, there are only so many felonies you can escape, it's getting kind of ridiculous by this point. I think the only way to keep this from being repetitive and to keep the themes of the first 3 seasons intact is to give Fisk a redemption arc. It plays into Matt's argument about redemption and ties very well into the themes of season 3. However, this doesn't come without difficulty. After season 1, all pretenses Fisk had about being the good guy all but evaporated. In season 2 and 3, he's fully aware of his selfish motives and have no justification for what he's doing. And ultimately, any redemption arc would have to end with him facing full justice for his crimes. Or hell, maybe we could do something even more different. Perhaps do something where Matt visits Fisk in prison, they have these weekly ideological chats about what he's going through, and maybe that leads to something. There's some great stuff you're leaving on the table here. Stories are an illusion, a microcosm to explore characters and situations, explore concepts and ideas that are designed to make you think about the story. And when you view Born Again through that lens, we are left with nothing to explore. It has none of its own merits to stand on, and it destroys the merits of the previous show. It's cheap, it's unsatisfying, and it's frustrating to watch an entire season about characters fighting tooth and nail to put this man behind bars, and he's simply out again and nobody seems to care, when this was supposed to be final. The next question is, why does Fisk want to be mayor?
What's my motivation?
Everyone acts confused and questions it, but it's never really answered as to why.
It still makes no sense to me, this mayor thing. So you gave up your criminal empire for what? So you could have less money and less power?
Yes, Fisk wants to improve the docks to build more wealth, but you don't need to be mayor to do that. Hell, pay someone off as a puppet candidate to do that position for you. It would work far better for getting support. He wants to get rid of vigilantes, but apparently vigilantes are so few and far between that they aren't really bothering his business. And again, you can pay off the mayor. But he wants supreme power to turn New York into his kingdom. But that's not the power the mayor has. Again, as mayor, despite what the show thinks, you can't just do anything you want to. There are people who will be watching and take notice. New York is a very financially important city. People will start asking questions if you start creating an authoritarian police and turn off the power grid. It doesn't make much sense. The moment the power went out, Fisk would be put on the fucking back burner. He would have zero power while people with real importance would actually be trying to fix the issue. Fisk arguably holds a lot less power right now while simultaneously doing things that would imply he has far more power than ever before, skipping over all the interesting conflicts you can do with Fisk being mayor. Considering what an uphill battle his run for office should be, you could milk that for amazing challenges and conflict for how he finally gets the seat, because you can show how he did it and that would become earned. Struggling to get people's vote as a write-in candidate whose reputation is down the toilet would fit perfectly with Fisk's ability to manipulate. You could spend an entire season on it. That was one of the interesting plots of Netflix Season 2. Fisk had almost nothing, and he spent what little he had to rebuild his power base and expand outwards, biding his time within the prison he controlled. But we don't get that because his election is over within the first episode. But that opens us up to the next big question. Why are people voting for him? From 2012 to 2018, he terrorized the city, he paid off the cops, he bulldozed low-income housing, he killed anyone that stood in his way, he bombed the city, he manipulated the media twice, he staged a very public escape, corrupted the FBI, he slaughtered the New York Bulletin, attacked a church, killed an FBI agent whose final message exposing him spread throughout the city, and even after that, he walked away free, where he continued to control a criminal empire and didn't try very hard to hide it. Somebody tell me how this man is able to walk into an election as a write-in candidate and win without any issues. How does anyone have a positive opinion of this man? In Season 3, the public opinion was so against Fisk, Foggy actually had a chance of becoming District Attorney purely based on the platform of taking Fisk down. He was so unpopular, he had to create a new enemy to take the light off him. People don't just forget this stuff because it's been 5 years. This is very important because the crux of what telling a story about a Mayor Fisk is why people voted for him. That is a very important part of being democratically elected. People need a reason as to why they voted for him, but the context of who Fisk is and the public opinion that surrounds him are entirely antithetical to this outcome. If a deeply hated terrorist walked onto the New York stage as a write-in candidate and started spouting populist opinions, I'm sorry to say this, but I think that opinion is going to trump any policies anyone is going to agree with. It just seems that the entirety of New York has amnesia. Oh, but Mayor Fisk, that's so cool. That's not an answer. How does he have this opinion? How would anyone have this opinion? It's trying to hearken to real life ideas of people being tired of nothing being done. It's trying to imitate certain political figures, but as I've explained, you can't rip out real world examples and place them into your fictional world when their contexts do not align. They don't even spend time to expose his rhetoric, to show Fisk doesn't actually get things done, that it's all a publicity stunt, that it's all built on lies. They completely ignore that aspect. To show Fisk gets things done, he marches over to a big hole and orders some random construction crew to fill it, even though that's not how hole filling works. I don't work on roads, but even I know it's not that simple. It needs to be surveyed, contracts need to be signed, it's this whole other thing. I'm surprised the show itself doesn't know this, since all it takes is a Google search to discover you don't just pour tarmac into a hole and hope it remains stable. And the show itself could have shown it was entirely just a publicity stunt, that either the hole was never fixed or that Fisk's measure didn't work because all he ever cared about was trending on Twitter to gain popularity, and then he simply moved to the next publicity stunt, allowing people to forget about the last one never being solved. What a perfect allegory for modern politics that just completely gets ignored. The show never exposes that Fisk's quick and simple solutions just don't work. Fisk's whole platform is built on Schrodinger's voter. They are both anti-vigilante enough to vote for Fisk, but also pro-vigilante enough that Matt can leverage Hector's identity as White Tiger to get him free. Even though The environmental reasons as to why people are pro-vigilante and anti-vigilante are entirely antithetical to each other. There isn't enough reason given to why people are sick of vigilantes, except the cops, which I would argue makes a lot of sense. But that has nothing to do with why the common person doesn't like vigilantes. We can only assume the opposite, as vigilantes in the MCU are constantly saving the world, so to make this work you have to assume it's because of all the damage vigilantes are causing. However, the show does not explore this. And the reason why people are pro-vigilante is because there simply aren't enough of them to protect the city, so they are both omnipresent enough to hate while being non-existent enough to be desperately needed. While you can point out fear-mongering campaigns where groups are targeted by elected officials to rally support behind them as evidence this can happen, these campaigns are ran on manipulated facts. You need a group of people to exist to point out the outliers who do bad things to present them as the whole, and more importantly, his fear-mongering campaign is pathetic. All he does is walk up on stage, say vigilantes are bad, and everyone cheers.
I want you to stop what you're doing and fill that hole.
I agree with that.
For people to get riled up in this way under Fisk, there needs to be way more here. And there are so many ways the show could explore this, but it fundamentally requires an abundance of vigilantes for people to get sick of them and have enough of them to do bad things that can be used as an example to stretch over the whole. To even get close to making this work, you need an entire season about the rise of Fisk, not just one episode for his election. You need people to be so incredibly sick of vigilantes they are forced to vote for someone they hate. You show how he manipulates and fearmongers the population into his control and turns them against the heroes, and that isn't impossible. We see that in our real world, people chase fame and glory and love power. And most importantly, they love to imitate people they idolize. In a world where heroes are basically celebrities who everyone looks up to, there would be crowds of people ready to try and make it big by fighting criminals, creating an abundance of vigilantes, many of which are poorly equipped and many of them would be ignorant of nuance and lack morals, or maybe just not even understand how the law works, most of which are impossible to be held accountable because of their anonymity. They could go around being judge, jury and executioner, and who would stop them? Who would hold them accountable for the damages they cause? This is where I think the Punisher worshippers would have worked, showing the extreme sides of this vigilante craze. You could have them made up of mostly cops who were resentful for how they are treated while vigilantes were praised, and they decided to take the law into their own hands, showing them as extreme rogues rather than just arsehole cops. And this is what Fisk would use to fuel the anti-vigilante fears. He could show the destruction that they cause and show the people that they kill, and show all the ways that they cause more harm than good, even if that's the most extreme circumstances he paints as the whole. Considering how much destruction even those street level heroes keep causing, I honestly thought that was going to be the point of the big hole that was memed to death. That just turned out to be nothing. But my point is that he uses this to rile people up. The politicians are trying to jump on his train or are failing to hold their pro-vigilante stance against him. He steamrolls over them into power, and that's where we leave the show, where Fisk has attained his throne, and will get rid of vigilantes so he can reign unopposed by heroes. But again, that's not what we got. I know these fixes don't fix all the problems, but at least it's better than what we got. At least these ideas would attempt to make these payoffs earned. At least they would make more sense. At least they would be more satisfying to watch. Because what we actually got is a show that shares nothing with the original. It doesn't even stand on its own merits. And I haven't even talked about all the problems. There are entire plot lines I haven't touched, entire scenes that are nonsensical, and an entire pointless episode. There is so much wrong with this show, which is absolutely the fault of the creative overhaul and Disney's oversight, but we've already been over that mess. But I think what allowed this Frankenstein abomination to happen is that Disney appears to be winding down its focusing on streaming. After Andor Season 2, Tony Gilroy came out about the issues he had securing funding for Andor, Disney's reasoning being that they viewed streaming as being dead. Given that Gilroy was having these issues, I imagine that there was no way Disney would allow all the funding that filmed 6 episodes to go to waste. especially after the actors and writers strike caused filming delays that stopped the other 12 episodes from being produced. They wanted to save money, and they wanted to hit a deadline. All in all, they probably succeeded, because not only did they manage to hit their deadline, they saved a lot of money by cutting season 1 in half and calling the other half season 2. But unfortunately that's not conducive to writing a good story. Because I honestly don't think anyone at Marvel cares about anything other than focusing on the next project to be pumped out of this production line, where what's valued is how much we can disguise a story enough to look like something which is close to acceptable, hoping people don't notice until after they've already bought the product, and then simply moving on to the next thing, hoping the well of goodwill doesn't run dry. But that's not how you make art! All of this is a group of incompetent people in a Soviet-style system where it's more about making your numbers look good than actually doing something, where it's more important to keep your distance away from problems and let other people take the fall for them, than actually step in and bloody fix it. A group of people born into running insurance companies who are detached from artists and reality, that they can't understand why the audience is fatigued, jumping at any excuse they can to find to avoid it being their fault. Their only motive is to fill the pockets of investors while they shove millions into their own pockets, while they lay off staff and let their companies burn, fueled by their own greed. I'm totally not mad about this fucking abysmal system that we use to make movies. I'm not upset about it at all. The only positive thing I can say about Born Again is that I actually have gained a lot more appreciation for the Netflix show, not only out of, well, pure contrast. Season 2, I was definitely too hard on you. But also the fact that it made me think a lot more about the story. I ended up finding more depth than I originally realised, and that's truly something amazing. That's how stories should be, rewarding you for engaging with it and thinking about it instead of punishing you for it. I actually came up with a few answers to problems I previously struggled to rectify, like Nobu's death and Matt's no-kill rule. I encourage you to go back and watch the first 3 seasons because it's peak television. Way better than whatever this is supposed to be. I also encourage you to seek out other videos on Born Again. I've already mentioned Southpaw, but I will also recommend Sheev Talks, whose video, while covering a lot of the same topics, does cover some areas that I didn't even bother to touch with my own video. Those will be in the description. If you've made it this far into the video, I'm honestly shocked. Congrats. Give me a devil emoji in the comments to let me know you're still here. Thank you for sticking around, though I haven't uploaded in 2 years. Bloody hell, that's a long gap. I hope the wait for the next video isn't that long, but no promises. If you do want to support my channel, I think I still have a Patreon. I assume it's still there. If you want to support me by just giving me a like and sharing this video, that is also very appreciated, thank you very much. But for now, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I thank you all for watching. But as always, this is Shiny Effects of the Alliance Navy Vessel Intervention, signing off.